Hey guys, SoCal Val here. You are listening to the Hitting the Turnbuckle podcast.
Welcome to the Hitting the Turnbuckle podcast with a new tag team today, a new duo of myself, Dave Robinson over here in the UK, and Parker Hamlet over there in the US, the absolute dream team when it comes to AEW fandom. How you doing, Parker? How's things?
Oh, David, so good to see you again, man. We've been talking all the products this week and, wanted some Forbidden Dave insight on a lot of what's been going on. And we kind of got a little bit of slander from Mr. Burrows on our SmackDown review, talking about how bad Collision's been and how bad Rampage has been. And, to be honest with you, I would agree with a lot of the Rampage slander up to this point, but I think you and I can both agree Collision has been some of the best wrestling TV for sure since its inception. Just what, 3 or 4 weeks ago now. And man, were we given a treat because, you see Punk Joe, they bill it as like this huge, big fight feel, but we're just completely taken by the tag match that occurred between FTR and the Bang Bang Gang, Bullet Club, Gold. Oh man, I mean, just that's what wrestling's all about. Got to fight forever chant. I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, David, but I mean, honestly, like that was just some captivating television last night. And for a Saturday night, as far as it's concerned, you're gonna have your skeptics about the longevity of what Collision can bring. But let me tell you, if Collision is like it was last night, Tony Khan is going to be just fine, and so is AEW. And I got some positive things to say about Rampage as well. So let's get right into it, David. I'm ready to go.
Well, I was so glad that me and you were reviewing this together because I love Andy and I love Ad, but they are WWE guys and they'll tell you they're WWE guys, but they'll tell you they love wrestling. They seem to take a little bit of satisfaction in pointing out any flaws or any time it doesn't go quite right for AEW. And this week, I don't really think AEW have put a foot wrong across 5 hours of television, to be honest. I think it's been a really, really good week for them. First of all, let's touch on Rampage. So I don't know if you share the same opinion as me, Parker, but since they've launched Collision, they've seemed to put new, fresh emphasis into Rampage as well. I thought Rampage was going to kind of fall down and be like the developmental show, the dark, or the real C show. But I think the content and some of the matches that we've got in the last few weeks on Rampage, they've really turned it up a notch there as well. I mean, this week we get the Elite, we get Young Bucks and Hangman up against Dark Order. We've got Sammy, Guevara, and Daniel Garcia up against Matt Hardy and Jeff Jarrett. Shida, Marina, Shafir, and the main event of Big Bill and Brian Cage up against Trent and Matt Sydal. So I really thought this was a strong show this week, and all the matches were given the adequate amount of time. What did you think of the show overall before we break down the matches?
Well, no, I definitely agree on the sentiment with Burrows and Adam. I think Adam leans a little bit more in our direction, but Burrows is a WWE guy, tried and true. He owns it. He wears it. We had a great little segment on our SmackDown review that kind of popped on YouTube a little bit. So make sure you guys go check our SmackDown review out. But I mean, there really is a big contrast between AEW programming, WWE program, that being that WWE is going to lean more towards the sports entertainers and your sports media centric stuff. It's going to lean a little bit more into the storylines. Whereas AEW, I've always said, you've always said, we're big fans of the in-ring product as far as what we get from a wrestling standpoint. And AEW, to its core, is ultimately always been about professional wrestling, excuse me, David. And because of that, right, I've always been big on AEW since its inception. And, when Rampage was first announced, the first episode was absolutely nuclear. I mean, they had Christian Cage take on Kenny Omega, I think, for the TNA title at the time. And, it was a great opening episode. But honestly, after that, after Punk came, it's really lacked any type of importance, I'd say. And, it's definitely taken a back seat, and it's become, a lot would argue, programming that's you can definitely miss. And this is coming from somebody that loves AEW and loves to watch AEW. But when Collision was announced, I definitely thought Rampage was seeing its kind of last legs. But with these last couple episodes of Collision that have come out, Rampage has definitely taken a step up. And, I definitely think Tony Khan's going to put a little bit more emphasis on Rampage, knowing that, it definitely went down on the pecking order, but you still have to make the programming feel meaningful. And, honestly, this was the first episode of Rampage I've enjoyed in quite some time. I thought the opener was great between the Dark Order and the Elite. A bunch of great near falls, the interference from the Blackpool Combat Club, Calloused, Kanosuke, all that stuff. And the main event, I mean, Big Cass in WWE may have been a failure, but Big Bill in AEW is certainly a sight to behold. Brian Cage, say what you want about him. He's locked in with AEW. Two nice big men taking on two, really athletic workers in Trent Baretta and I think Matt Sydal. I thought that was a fun main event as well. You had the women's match as well. Hikaru Shida showing while she was one of the, pillars of the AEW women's division. I mean, I really thought Rampage was, 1 foot in the grave, David. But I got to say, I mean, if this is what we're going to get out of Rampage every Friday, they might get me to start tuning in more often than not.
Definitely. Well, it seemingly was an extension of Dynamite this week. And as you say, we saw the Hung Bucks against the Dark Order. Dark Order picked up their win. So that's leveled it. The one win each. Towards the end of the match, we got interference, as you say, from Takeshita. Claudio come down and hit a big uppercut. So there was a lot of interference, and that's obviously playing into the bigger storyline in terms of Blood and Guts. So what are your thoughts on Blood and Guts? What do you think about the mystery entries in it as well? They've got one per team. Any ideas who you think we'll be seeing at Blood and Guts, and what do you think? Are you excited going into that match? I'm pretty sure you will be.
Well, I'm really intrigued to hear your opinion on this latest report. I don't remember exactly who reported on it. It was PW Insider. You guys can fact check me on this as you're listening, watching, and I'll obviously make sure you guys subscribe, whether you're watching us, listening to us, whatever have you. There's rumors that obviously the fifth man for the Elite is definitely looking like it's going to be Kota Ibushi. You had Kenny Omega cut the promo off air because, I mean, they rushed Dynamite quick off the air this week. I wasn't on the Dynamite review. They kind of left Dynamite on a cliffhanger, but as they went off the air, Kenny kind of alluded to the fact that he went to Japan to talk to somebody earlier this year. I mean, it looks like it's going to be Kota Ibushi is going to be the fifth man for the Elite. I think that's said and done. I think that's a cataclysmic signing for all Elite Wrestling. Golden Lovers and AEW is best for business. But if there's anything that I'm really enticed with, it's who the fifth man is for the Blackpool Combat Club. Obviously, Bryan Danielson in his rematch against Kazuchika Okada was injured, so he's not going to be in that match. It's looking like Eddie Kingston's not going to be there, so that, let's hit it with the New Day. Who's it going to be? Well, there is now a report that there was a pitch internally for the fifth man to be one. I don't know if you guys are watching, CM Punk. Now, I don't see this happening, but reportedly, Jon Moxley is not against it. If there is any kind of plan long-term for the Elite and CM Punk or CMFTR, whatever, to cross paths, I think that would be a great way to kind of get that ball rolling. Still, with all that being said, I think the safe bet is probably Chris Jericho, who was pitched by Don Callis to join the Don Callis family. The Don Callis family is clearly in a weird situationship with the Blackpool Combat Club. Yeah. So I think whoever the fifth man for the Blackpool Combat Club is going to be the most interesting storyline in regards to how this all ties in with Blood and Guts. But I think this Blood and Guts match is shaping up to probably be the best one we've gotten to date.
Yeah, I think if we had a little bit more time, Punk would be a really interesting choice. But because we're not far out and we saw the development this week with Callis and Jericho, it's seemingly leaning towards Chris to be the fifth man. And he's been in the last two Blood and Guts matches as well. So he's obviously got an affinity with the match. He must be insane. He wouldn't get me in one of those matches. But I think that might be the 5-on-5.
With that being said, though, David, just to kind of play devil's advocate on this.
Yeah.
This Wednesday is the 12th. That's Dynamite. This Saturday, being the 15th, as we're recording here on the 9th, is when Punk takes on Starks. If Starks goes over on Punk, which I honestly think that's probably is what is going to happen there, that following Wednesday, the 9th, is when Blood and Guts takes place. So you could have Punk out of the Owen Hart tournament before Blood and Guts, if need be. But I'm like you. If I'm a betting man and I'm going to Vegas, I'm putting all my chips in on Y2J.
Yeah. And speaking of Jericho, two of his proteges were in action next, up against Matt and Jeff, but it wasn't Matt and Jeff Hardy. It was Matt Hardy and Double J and Jeff Jarrett. This was a fun match, I thought, against Garcia and Guevara. I think the right team picked up the win. What I really found interesting in this match, obviously, it's a blind eliminator tournament, and there was a bit
I
of a
love
blind.
the concept.
Yeah. There was that blind tag at the end. Garcia picked up the tag after Guevara had hit the go to hell, and he picked up the win. And there was a little bit of what's going on there kind of situation. And maybe way down the line, we end up with a one-on-one match with those two guys. But for now, how do you think they fare in the tournament? And what do you think about that team?
I think this tournament really is ultimately all about Maxwell Jacob Friedman and Adam Cole, baby.
Yes.
I think that's what this tournament's about. And that's fine because, to be honest with you, as far as like from a sports entertainment aspect, what had my interest the most this week was definitely MJF and Adam Cole. I mean, I was laughing my ass off and just watching that entire segment kind of play out. It was just like MJF was almost a magician. He just kept pulling, magic tricks out his hat, and it was a little bit drawn out, but I still thought it was just absolutely hilarious stuff. With all that being said, as far as like what other teams I think fare in this tournament, I think Orange Cassidy and Darby Allin versus MJF and Adam Cole is definitely the vision for the finals. As far as the other teams, I'm a big Daniel Garcia guy. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like he's very underrated. He's a young guy that they have definitely invested into. You can tell he spent a lot of time with Jericho. He's getting that little dance over, which just absolutely cracks me up. I love that spot at Forbidden Door when he was just getting beat up by Shibata and
he kept falling back against the ropes and coming back
falling against the ropes, hitting the dance again. I mean, it was just absolutely hilarious stuff. I think Daniel Garcia is really coming into his own. I remember when he was the Red Death and he was fighting Punk on Rampage, and I saw something in it, man. I really did, and I really hope that they continue to put him in meaningful situations. Sammy Guevara, who you could argue since AEW All Access, they've been kind of going on a Keith Lee type of redemption tour with him, trying to get him back over in the good graces of the fans. It's kind of up to interpretation how that's going. You had Jericho kind of talk to these two guys and tell them that the end looks like it's on the horizon for the Jericho Appreciation Society. So it looks like he's kind of leaving the young ones to fight amongst themselves, and that seems to be the theme of the story here. And if it is, put all these guys in the ring and let them kill each other. I mean, I think it's going to be great. I am interested to see how all this stuff pays off. Yeah. But like I said, the final is just clear as day to me. It's Darby and freshly squeezed versus MJF and Adam Cole, and what they do with the rest of those guys, I'll definitely be intrigued. But I definitely think that's the vision.
Cool. On to some of the women now from AEW. One of the top talents and one of the women that I like is Hikaru Shida. I think she's so good, and unfortunately, much of her championship reign, or all of her reign, was during COVID. I certainly think we'll see her hold the title again at some point in the fairly near future. She was up against Marina Shafir, and they're obviously quite high on Marina Shafir as well. She features quite prominently on this type of show. Maybe she was on Dark a lot, and she's featured on Dynamite. She's spent a lot of time on Rampage. This didn't go too long. But what did you think? And were you a fan of Shida?
Oh, Hikaru Shida, at AEW's inception, Kenny Omega worked very closely with all the women, and Hikaru Shida, you can make an argument, couldn't really get over in U.S. audiences at one point, but I mean, it's really hard to do that.
Yeah.
With COVID and all that stuff. I mean, that was uncharted territory they were entering into, and I think if you give Hikaru Shida a nice run nowadays with the women's championship in AEW, I feel like it would be a much different set of circumstances and a much different story. And I think the fan perception would be a lot different in general. So, a lot like with a guy like Drew McIntyre, WWE, you think about what could have been had they been given a full-fledged reign. And I definitely think that every time I see Hikaru Shida, I mean, she's got the mean streak, goes out there with the kendo stick, kicks ass, has a nice little stiff competition here with Marina Shafir, who, and I definitely says is getting better. She doesn't look nearly as green as people like Jade Cargill. And, I'm not one to bash Jade Cargill, but obviously she's very green. And with all that being said, I thought this was fun. I think this was a good place of the women on the card for Rampage. And, like I said, this was a nice little fun 1 hour of wrestling. And I don't know if we're quite done talking about it, but, I thought this was all really fast, really on the nose. Every match felt like it had a purpose, and all of it felt pretty well constructed, which is a lot of things I'm not used to saying about Rampage so far in 2023.
Yeah, I checked out. I think it was Moxley that was talking about Shafir, and she's somebody that does ask for a lot of advice, and she's somebody that
he
is
put
really
her
keen
over
to learn.
big in that interview.
Yeah. I think it was with Renee, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was oral sessions, I think.
Yeah. Main event of this, it was Big Bill and Brian Cage advancing. They go on to face Adam Cole and MJF next week on Dynamite, which should be a great match. I think this was the right team to win here, and an interesting dynamic to go up against. Our current favourites in terms of storyline and entertainment, the Adam Cole and MJF odd couple, and we're glad that that's continuing for a few more weeks. So, yeah, a solid Rampage, but Collision this week was off the charts for me.
Man,
I think Collision, particularly this week, it was the perfect blend of wrestling. The commentary so good, the presentation's so good. I think the Collision was the show of the week, and I've watched everything this week, which I can't say.
It's not a contest, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've watched Raw, SmackDown, Dynamite, Rampage, Collision, and Impact Wrestling this week. I didn't watch NXT, but out of all those shows, Collision this week was sensational. What did you think of the show, and what did you think of the start in terms of CM Punk coming out and talking about Owen Hart? I mean, I goosebumps during that spot.
Oh, it's funny because you have a lot of CM Punk detractors, or you have a lot of people that are CM Punk haters, more or less in general. And, understandably so. I mean, the Brawl situation was an absolute mess. And while he definitely is, my childhood favorite and, I hold him near and dear to my heart, Phil didn't exactly handle that whole thing very well. And you had a lot of people kind of scoffing at the One Bill Phil thing and, the Collision's announcement, people talking about it being a hard brand split. What a great idea to separate the locker room. But the problem is, you had a lot of people in that locker room just sitting around, not really doing much, like your Andrades, like your Miros, like your Malachi Blacks. I mean, I could go on your Scorpio Skies. And this, Collision's inception really gives them an opportunity to kind of showcase why they were frustrated with just kind of sitting in the back. You could argue some of these guys, aren't exactly doing anything super compelling since they've gotten opportunities on Collision. But as far as a pace for a 2-hour show and a balance of wrestling and storytelling, Collision was the standard this week as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I absolutely slammed SmackDown because you had the Bloodline segment was supposed to go for 20 minutes originally, slotted, ends up going for 40. They gave that thing way too much time to breathe, and to me, it just took away from the overall wrestling of the show. You watch Collision, start to finish. They're in Regina. I'm expecting this crowd to absolutely bury Punk. I really am. And Punk goes out there in the Lion's Den and cuts a babyface promo and damn near turns the crowd around on him completely. I'm not going to say there still wasn't a good portion of that crowd that was not, messing with CM Punk. But ultimately, I thought that was a brilliant move by Phil to go out there, cut that promo. And man, did they make this match feel like a big deal, David. I mean, they really did. I mean, you had them walking around pre-match like it was a UFC fight. You had the tail of the tape. I mean, this is how you make a match feel like a big deal. You add that, including the Saturday Night Fight theme to it. I mean, this is everything you want Collision to be and more. And, you really kind of thought the overall arcing theme of this episode is Punk Joe 4. Punk Joe 4, 18 years since these two have fought. Can Punk finally get his first win? But I never really felt like I was just waiting for the main event. No. Everything leading up to that, in my opinion, was really good television. I mean, you have Andrade just pleading with Malachi Black, and you and I both know Aleister Black and Andrade and WWE were absolutely killing it. And, I don't even need to talk about what these guys did on the independents. I mean, these two are going to go, and it's going to be an absolutely fantastic contest. I think it needs to be at a pay-per-view. Yep. You have Scorpio Sky coming back, taking on Action Andretti. I thought it was fine. Really not complaining about it. We're getting more alluding to Miro, who a lot of people can make an honest argument could be the one to take the international title off of Orange Cassidy, if you want to kind of give him more importance in AEW. In this tag match of the week, I don't think I could put over this match enough. And this Regina crowd absolutely went ballistic during this match, and understandably so. I mean, this was like prime FTR we're seeing. We're talking about like NXT TakeOver FTR with just some of the technical wrestling, the false finishes, the mat-to-mat wrestling, the storytelling. I could sit here and mark out all day long about it, but this is why you brought FTR to All Elite Wrestling. And this was them kind of at their apex. You know, I can't say enough about how good this episode of Collision was, David. I really can't.
I mean, that when Punk came out and he's cutting the promo and he's talking about Stampede and he's talking about Owen and he's saying that's the name that I want wrestling fans to be chanting. And they didn't need much encouragement. They got an Owen chant going straight away.
Goosebumps.
Man, I wrote down goosebumps. I was fighting tears. I'm an emotional guy at times, you know, and I was really kind of feeling that. But also, as you say, the excitement and the big fight feel to what really felt like a pay-per-view quality main event to cap off a huge week of wrestling. But first matchup was the other semi-final, and the winner of this will be going on to face the winner of the main event next week. And it was Starks up against Hobbs. This was a good match, I thought. We've seen these guys go to battle before, and they know each other really well. Obviously, they've got the history together in Team Taz. It was Ricky that picked up the win here. But interestingly, at the end, it was involvement from QT that actually, I thought this was really clever how they did this. It was backfiring, and QT was there pleading with the ref to make the count. And then Hobbs saw that, and he was furious because they thought QT was, you know, causing the issue. When the match finished, after Ricky picked up the win with a spear, Hobbs hit a spinebuster on Solo, and then he went to attack QT, and Harley Cameron dived in the way. So QT escaped this week. Do you think this is the end of Hobbs's relationship with QTV? Do you think he's back to the Book of Hobbs, or do you think there's a bit more left in this story yet?
We can only hope that this is the end. I see Mr. QT Marshall as I see the Miz as regarded to like how he's tied to Tommaso Ciampa. Just dead weight, really. I mean, sure, it gives him someone to beat up. Sure, he's finally getting out on his own. Sure, this is a big story beat for Powerhouse Hobbs. But when Powerhouse Hobbs won the TNT title, it felt like there was something missing.
Yeah.
And, you know, to me, it's that, you know, factor of Hobbs being a legitimate threat.
Yeah.
And someone the caliber of Powerhouse Hobbs shouldn't really need a guy like QT Marshall in his corner. And I think, you know, the QTV stuff, while I'm not the biggest fan of it, it can serve as sort of a device on AEW television. But Powerhouse Hobbs never fit in any of it. And I think the faster he gets out of it, the better. I'm sure we're building up to that moment where he finally gets his hands on QT. You know, we had a little bit of the misdirection, you know, with her kind of getting in the way right at the very end.
Yeah.
But, you know, with all that being said, it looks like all in all, you know, Hobbs has pulled himself away from the QTV stuff. I don't think he's completely done with it yet, but I think this is great character progression. I think that was the biggest story of the match, obviously.
Yeah.
And my biggest takeaway from it, you know, you're going to have Starks move on. You're going to have Starks take on CM Punk, which I think is very interesting. You know, especially with kind of the dynamic we've seen with Starks and Punk on TV when they've been tagging together. You know, he's kind of almost been too nice to Ricky Starks on TV. You can
like a mentor type role, hasn't it? Yeah. Well,
and to see those two kind of take each other on next week's going to be more than interesting. But I'm definitely happy to see Powerhouse Hobbs kind of pulling himself away from this QTV stuff. And obviously Ricky Starks and, you know, Powerhouse Hobbs have a lot of history between the two. I think, you know, Kevin Kelly, who's just, I can't say enough about this commentary team, you know, put it all over really great on commentary. I thought this match was fast paced, two young guys just going at it, knocking the hell out of each other. I think he had the right winner here. And, you know, I think both men come out of this a lot better than they did going in.
Yeah. I was kind of hoping that we'd get this match as well. We've already saw Hobbs against Punk when Punk first came back. So I was hoping for the Starks match in the final. So I think that's going to be a great match next week. And as you say, hopefully new pastures for Hobbs. He's still got the Book of Hobbs on his gear. So that suggests to me that he will be sticking with that direction that he was going in before joining up with QT Marshall and his cronies. Next up, there's a Miro package. We've already touched on that, and I think it's interesting what you say in terms of he could be the man to finally beat Orange Cassidy. I definitely think that could be a direction they go in. And we had a women's matchup. We didn't get Athena versus Willow this week because of an injury to Willow. So that match is going to happen next week. I think that's going to go ahead on Rampage next week. And
now Willow did lose her title recently.
Stardom, wasn't it?
Yeah, who did she lose it to?
Another Julia. It wasn't Julia Hart because that was confusing.
That really caught me off guard. I was like, Julia Hart. I was like, what?
yeah. When did that happen?
Yeah, that's all I can think of. We kind of got screwed out of a really good women's match here, to be honest with you. But I mean, we're finding out it's happening in, not even a week's time. So I guess we can't complain too much.
Yeah, Julia, there's not a lot to say about this Julia Hart match. She was up against a local wrestler called Bambi Hall. Julia picked up the win. I love Julia's presentation. I say it a lot with the House of Black, the theme, the fact that she had Brody backing her up as well. I thought that adds another element as well and puts her on the same kind of level as Buddy and Brody, with obviously Malachi as the leader. And off the back of that, we got the Malachi promo in response to the Andrade promo, talking about the mask and basically saying that Andrade is holding onto the mask like a child would hold onto a toy, and he wants the best version of Andrade to come out. Andrade responds with saying that when the mask comes off, it means it's business time. So I certainly think it would be business time and fight time for those two guys down the line. Possibly All In or All Out, and maybe we're leading towards that because that feels like a big match for a pay-per-view. But we may get it before then. You looking forward to that? I'll take it you are.
Oh man, let me tell you. So when Mr. Phil Brooks wasn't in WWE, I had to kind of find one of my new favorites. And a guy, and as NXT was kind of rising up through the charts, I really gravitated towards a guy named Aleister Black.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, if you don't know what Aleister Black was about, there is an amazing library. Go check it out on Peacock. This guy, takeover after takeover, showed, he can be one of your biggest, supernatural, Undertaker-esque kind of, baby faces. I mean, this guy can do it all in the ring. Yeah. He's obviously very creative. We've seen a lot of stuff he's done with the House of Black in AEW so far. I popped so hard when he kicked Cody in the face when he debuted, I got to say. But, and I got to say, like, the Trios title win when, they took on, the Elite at Revolution, I thought was one of the better matches of the year. Yeah. And I thought it was one of the best trios contests I've probably ever seen. I mean, the House of Black, I mean, they have it all. You got your big powerhouse and Brody King. You got Buddy Matthews, who I can argue is one of the most underrated professional wrestlers in the world. Malachi, who's just kind of the creative center of it all and is still a great technical wrestler in his own right. I love everything the House of Black is about. And, the more they take on, kind of on AEW television, the better as far as I'm concerned. And as far as like, TV is concerned, and pay-per-view, like I said, you put Andrade and Malachi in the ring together and you give them 30 minutes on a pay-per-view, and these two guys are walking out superstars. So I'm all for it. I'm a big Malachi Black guy. Happy to hear that him and, all the other House of Black guys are Collision guys. They kind of came out and talked about that this week. So yeah. I think House of Black should have something to do on AEW TV, especially Collision, every single Saturday, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, before you made your return to Buckle, we spoke a lot on podcast regarding AEW about what the introduction to Collision would do for guys like Malachi Black, giving them the extra time to really showcase what they can do, which we all aware of, that we saw in, it was bi-weekly or sometimes monthly. We wouldn't get that flow of seeing them every week, unfortunately, because there just wasn't enough time on Dynamite to get everybody on.
Good point.
So with Collision launching, we're starting to see some of the best of House of Black. I've been a Malachi fan, but I saw him on a show in the UK when he was still performing as Tommy End, and then obviously went on to WWE and he's run there in NXT. When he showed up in AEW, that was one of the best signings for me that they could have made. And I'm really into the House of Black stuff. But you mentioned about that trios match being a match of the year. Up next on Collision, this tag team match, I'm impressed. It's a bit of recency bias, so I'm thinking, is it the best tag match of the year? I certainly think it's in the conversation. This was FTR up against Bullet Club Gold, and this was wrestling tag team perfection. Dax and Cash, we can't speak highly enough of, but Juice and Jay here, props to all four guys in this match, just bought it. It was, if you haven't watched it, if any of you guys are kind of listening to this or watching this on YouTube, just to hear the results of what happened on Collision, I implore you, please go and find this match.
8 minutes on YouTube. It'll be the best tag team wrestling you've probably seen all year. And I'm not gassing that up too much. It really was just a sight to behold.
Well, I've talked about this where they do the title eliminator. So if the champions are in action and the title's not on the line, it can really make the match feel much bigger. There's more stakes on the line if the contenders can earn a title shot, and you're not whereas if it's a title match, you're kind of expecting the champions to win, particularly when it's on television rather than pay-per-view. So this added element, I didn't know which way this was going to go. I kind of hoped that Juice and Jay could pick up the win so I could see more of it, and that's exactly what happened. It was such a clever finish as well. Nobody looked bad in this. They all just elevated themselves. The team that won, the team that lost, everyone was elevated, man. I can't speak highly enough. Parker, what are some of your thoughts on this match?
Two different sequences in this match were just absolutely masterclass. You had one where Jay White was going for a Blade Runner on Dax Hardwood, and you had Cash kind of step in and like almost like cut off the contact so that he couldn't get the full momentum of the move. You had Juice Robinson come in and pretty much stop the big rig midair.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, man, I just like I said, like I haven't seen stuff like this from FTR since like American Alpha and the Revival and NXT Takeover. And don't get me wrong, FTR has put on some absolute classics with the Briscoes, with the Young Bucks since they've been in AEW. But I mean, these two pairs look like wrestling soulmates in there. And I really do think, Dax Harwood's been reported to have creative control on AEW Collision. I really do think the point of this entire contest was to make Jay White look like a superstar. And man, did they, because they were hitting him with everything they had in their arsenal. And this is a deep arsenal. I mean, FTR are students of the game, one of the best tag teams in the world. And Jay just kept kicking out and kicking out and kicking out and kicking out. And I really think that was the purpose of this entire contest, was to put over Jay White and build him up as a credible threat. And I think that, Jay White's stock each week just keeps going up and up and up and up. And you have Juice Robinson as like that foil who just keeps coming in and constantly disrupting the flow of the match and kind of ruining some of these like, fatalities that FTR are trying to perform on Jay White. And then Jay White, and like you said, that just absolutely creative finish. I loved it. I thought the flow of the match was great. It was relentless. I think that's the word I would use to describe this match, is relentless. I mean, there were just some sequences that were just moving so fast. It's almost like you watch this and, think if they are calling it in the ring, how do they have like, it was just really some of the best tag team wrestling I've seen in 2023. I mean, I'm not just, trying to swell up Collision here. I'm not going to say I didn't have high expectations for this match, but all eyes were on the main event. But man, this was match of the week, match of the night. It like David said, if you're going to watch one match this week, check out this match. I mean, this was just like I said, a relentless contest between both teams. And now we're getting a 2 out of 3 falls match between these two teams next. I mean, man, if this is what they do with a little bit of TV time and a regular Eliminator tag team match, Lord knows what they will do in a 2 out of 3 falls match. I think they have a vision. I think the best is yet to come.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, I expected a good match because Dax and Cash was in it first and foremost. Not that I'm big fans of Juice and Jay, but although they've been teaming recently in Bullet Club Gold, they're not like a long-standing tag team, whereas FTR have been tagging their whole career, the tag team specialists. So I don't even know if I was surprised. I know
Jay and Juice look like they belonged in that ring. They look like they had just as much synchronicity as FTR did. And to me, that is a testament.
Yeah. And we get, as you say, we're getting the 2 out of 3 falls match next week. I'm excited for that. I'm glad we are. Would you have held off and left it for the pay-per-view? Or do you think, I don't know, which way do you think they're going to go with this?
I'd be a hypocrite if I told you that I didn't think that they were doing a little bit too much too soon.
Yeah.
That was kind of the mark in me talking. I said on the SmackDown review, I feel like they did too much bloodline stuff in one night when you still have weeks until the pay-per-view. I'm not 100% sure of the vision, but, I definitely think I would have let this one marinate a little bit.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I almost feel like going straight into 2 out of 3 falls match, that's some pay-per-view quality stuff we're probably working into. And, it's almost like you're not letting this first match kind of marinate and, get over and let people kind of enjoy that before you're kind of already going into the sequel. You could argue that your whole trilogy. I think we're going to see probably some false, like some dirty finishes. I think there's going to be a lot of story beats in this 2 out of 3 falls match, maybe some DQs.
Yeah.
Who knows how all that stuff's going to play out. Eventually, Jay White and Juice Robinson are going to have to be dastardly heels, and they're going to try to get over an FTR in the wrong way. I think this might be a situation where there's going to be a lot of, funny business going on in this 2 out of 3 falls match. At least that's how I would justify it happening so soon after this first contest. But I definitely agree with the sentiment that they probably could have waited on this before they pulled the trigger.
Yeah. I know I'm going to enjoy the match, but certainly they leave it open for another match at a grander stage, whether that's
it's for the titles, right?
It's for the titles, yeah. I'd have to say that. Yeah, by Bullet Club Gold winning this match, they earned the title shot. So, going to be a great match. So up next, we had the re-debut or the return of Scorpio Sky. We obviously saw a video package last week, and we thought that Scorpio was going to be part of Collision. This is the first time we've seen him appear in some time, and we weren't too sure if he was a good guy or a bad guy. And he was up against Action Andretti this week. I thought this was a pretty good match. Action Andretti got a lot of cool spots in. There was a really good Spanish fly. Ultimately, Scorpio picked up the win with an awesome looking TKO. The end of the match, he offered his hand out and shook the hand of Action Andretti. So maybe he's a good guy. Was that your interpretation, Parker? And what did you think of the match?
My interpretation of Scorpio Sky's return to AEW television is make me care. Okay. So, I'm a big fan of Scorpio Sky. I thought he actually had kind of an underrated, library of matches in All Elite Wrestling since its inception back in 2019. And obviously, correct me if I'm wrong, David, but he was a part of the inaugural champions in SoCal Uncensored. He's kind of always been attached to, Christopher Daniels, Frankie Kazarian. Daniel's obviously more of a producer role now. Frankie Kazarian kind of seeing an exit from All Elite Wrestling due to, kind of creative differences. Says it's not really what it's about anymore. So that kind of leaves him as the odd man out of the initial group, kind of a part of who were the first tag team champions in the promotion. So, he's kind of seen his way off TV. There's been reports of, him kind of being a locker room issue, him kind of being outspoken backstage, which is a common theme with a lot of these guys. But a lot like Miro, I'm already kind of seeing that they don't really have a sense of direction with the narrative in which they want to take him in. So it looks like he's going to be a babyface, like you said, offering his hand out to Action Andretti. But where Scorpio Sky really shines to me, David, I know, for the sake of being long-winded and all of this, where Scorpio Sky resonates with me is his in-ring ability. And I think you go out there and him and Action Andretti, let him have a best of 7 or something. I mean, just let Scorpio Sky kind of refamiliarize himself with the AEW audience. I think he's captivating with what he can do in ring. As far as like finding his character, I think there's a lot left to be desired, but it was nice to see him back on television. I do think he is an asset to the company, and I do want to see him in a little bit more of a meaningful program going forward. But I mean, it's still early, so I can't really write it off too soon. But that was my honest, raw interpretation of the entire segment.
Difficult one for me. I think AEW generally does a good job of their lower and their mid-card guys of presenting them well and presenting them as stars.
Oh, yeah.
But sometimes there's that difficulty of those mid-carders making that step up to the top level. I know we've got the TNT Championship, and he's
a former TNT champion, if I'm not mistaken.
Twice, I think. I think he's held it twice. We've got the international title as well. Maybe, I don't know if we need more belts in AEW at the minute. That probably won't go down too well with a lot of people. But I'm thinking a kind of X Division style thing. I don't know. Maybe something like that. Maybe that's where guys like Scorpio Sky fit. I'm not sure. I can't see him going for a world championship. And as you say, he's already been in the TNT title picture. So I don't know.
There's got to be something to fight for in Collision. You know, I mean, we've had Punk alluding to having Max's title in the bag. He never lost it. With that being said, though, we haven't seen any international title defenses, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Luchasaurus defending the TNT title soon? I don't think that's on Collision, though, either. It's a battle of the belts, if I'm not mistaken.
That's a battle of the belts, and he's up against Sean Spears.
So, I mean, we're not really seeing any, of these mid-echelon titles being defended on Collision. So it makes you wonder, like, which one of these titles is going to kind of be the B title on Collision. And at the end of the day, Collision still doesn't even really have an A title. So I was kind of thinking the same thing. We're getting all these kind of, you could argue random singles contests between competitors, which I'll never complain about a good exhibition, but ultimately, what do people in wrestling fight for? To be champions. So that is an interesting conversation I think you and I are going to have on these Collision review shows in the foreseeable future is what are they fighting for,
Because I don't want to see the Ring of Honor titles. I want to keep Ring of Honor separate. I think that works better for everyone involved. Because you can't really put together meaningful feuds and you're building towards Ring of Honor pay-per-views if you've got this interaction with AEW wrestlers on Dynamite, Collision, Rampage. So I think, yeah, it's definitely got to be a separate entity. But yeah, we'll pick that up at some point, I'm sure, in the next few weeks. On to the main event for Collision. And this, for me, absolutely met expectations, probably exceeded them a little bit, to be totally honest. And I didn't think anything could come close to the tag match, but this was another match of 2023 for me. They built it really well with the packages as well, with the Ring of Honor footage. And this was actually their guys' fourth match. Samoa Joe hadn't lost to CM Punk. So it was a really interesting dynamic. The winner would go on to face Ricky Starks in the final. Parker, I thought this was sensational. I loved it. It was a very different type of match to all the other type of matches we've seen this week, really, in AEW. What did you think of the main event, and what did you think about CM Punk advancing to the final?
I feel like everybody's Twitter looks a little bit different, especially if you're a wrestling fan. But throughout my timeline, through the duration of this week, whether it be Backup Hangman, Tranquilo Club, all of those guys did just like AEW, phenomenal job of hyping up Punk Joe 4, which if you're a wrestling historian, I mean, you don't have to be, a CM Punk diehard or a Samoa Joe diehard to know that these two went at it for an absolute classic trio of matches in the early 2000s. And, Joe going over on Punk every single time, a lot of these contests ending in draws, and just the stories that these two would tell with each other, with a lot of nuance and a lot of subtleties. And to me, what was really interesting about this is that Joe's always Joe, right? He's the toughest son of a bitch in professional wrestling, and I don't use that term lightly. Like I said, I think on our last Collision review episode, he's the type of guy that doesn't just give out the punishment. He can take it as well. And kind of going into this matchup, I don't know about you, but I always kind of wonder what the dynamic is, what story they're going to tell. And, with Punk, already having two significant injuries in his return to All Elite Wrestling, you're almost kind of wondering, like, all right, they're not going to go out there and throw out like it's the early 2000s. Punk's just not built like that anymore. I mean, even when Joe did the walk away spot, when Punk did the crossbody in the middle of the ring, the way Punk landed, I was just grimacing at it. And what I really loved early in this match, Dave, and we're just going to get down to the bare bones of it, is Punk avoiding the chops, knowing that, his body already got a lot of miles on it, and he can't take the type of punishment that Samoa Joe can dish out even in 2023. Back in their early contests, I kind of refamiliarized myself with the initial trilogy. It was on Twitter. It was everywhere. Punk was just taking the punishment. He wasn't. He's a grizzled veteran in the sport. Who knows how much time he's got left. And, he was avoiding everything Joe was throwing at him. And I thought this was really a throwback and kind of two archetypes of workers that we really don't see anymore. Two guys that, went out there and kind of and I'd argue a limited amount of TV time. I think it was a 25-minute contest, commercial time included. I thought they made every move count, and they made everything feel impactful. And, it almost felt like you were watching real combat sports in a way, because, every time they hit each other, they knew they were wearing the other person down. I mean, this was not a spot fest. This was a old school match, and it had the big fight feel. It felt worthy of the main event. And obviously, it was everything that I hoped it would be and more. And what I liked about it the most, David, is that while it was still a great contest, and I love the psychology of it, and I thought it was everything it was supposed to be, it still left you wanting more. Yep. And, the post-match beat of, Punk sticking his hand out to shake Joe's hand, Joe shaking and choking him, and then just standing over him saying, I'm better than you. I've always been better than you. Realistically, this is Punk's first win, right? This is Punk's first win. So there's still a score left to be settled. I mean, this is 20 years where Joe's been able to say, I've had CM Punk's number. Punk gets him on a roll up. You felt just that rage of Samoa Joe, and you definitely felt like this was far from over. So it would not surprise me to see Samoa Joe get involved in the Owen Hart final, cost CM Punk that match. And, that's, Punk Joe 5 being what we're looking at on the horizon. As much as we want Punk to kind of mingle with the elite, I think we are far from done with Punk and Joe in the ring. But at the same time, if this was it, I'd say this was a really good addition to a really good library of matches between CM Punk and Samoa Joe. So like I said, I had so much fun with this. This was really kind of a nice little throwback to what I loved about wrestling growing up.
Well, Kevin Kelly at that moment when Joe turned on him called him a bitter, vindictive son of a bitch. Which
God, I loved it. I loved it. I loved it.
Kevin Kelly and McGuinness's commentary, as we spoke about at the start of the review, so good. It gives Collision a different feel to Dynamite and Rampage as well. Towards the end of the match, Joe got Punk in a crippler crossface. Punk hit Joe with a power slam. After the power slam, we got some Owen Hart chants. There was a thank you Owen sign in the crowd as well, which again, I got goosebumps over that. And I was thinking,
me too.
I was thinking, thank you, Punk, thank you, Joe, but thank you, Martha Hart, as well, for agreeing to be involved with AEW, for organising this with Tony Khan and allowing us as fans to pay tribute to Owen and the wrestlers to pay tribute to Owen with the tournament. It's just absolutely perfect. And as a fan, I really appreciate everything that goes into this tournament. And I hope it's a tournament that we get to see every year. As you say, Joe hit him with a cocaine clutch. Punk dropped down, rolled at 1, 2, 3. They did a handshake. Joe turned on him, and that's when Kevin Kelly hit that line on him. Prior to that, I'd noted 3-1 to Joe, more to come, ? I think after that finish, we definitely get more. And if Joe is involved with the final next week up against Ricky Starr, costing Punk the match, or even if he doesn't cost him the match, if he's involved in any way, I think there'll be a continuation of this, and I think we'll see Punk against Joe again in the future.
And it makes you wonder, right? Because, you have maybe Punk could run a little bit of a Cody Rhodes gauntlet like Cody did with Seth and go 3-0 on him. And then you're looking at a potential rubber match. I mean, that's 3-3 right there. So you got to wonder, are they trying to 50-50 book this situation? How do they do it and still build the intrigue? I would almost build it as, Joe saying there was a fluke victory, have Punk get another. Like I said, Punk could string together some wins and have this a 3-3, overall record between the two, and then have the blow off be at a big pay-per-view for AEW, concluding in an event even as far out as Full Gear. I think this is something you could really take your time with. And I could tell that these two gentlemen still had a lot left in the tank when this contest was over. They had a lot that you could tell that this thing is far from over. I mean, like I said, when two guys are really good at what they do and they know how to work and they know how to get the crowd going and they know all the right beats to hit, if by the end you're left wanting more, they did their job. And I was definitely left wanting more by the end of it. I'm really glad you put over the commentary as well, David, because the commentary, man, do they give this stuff a big fight feel. Man, do they give this stuff like the combat sports vibe that we so desperately miss on Dynamite. And I'm not trying to bury any of the Dynamite commentary team, but it just really pales into comparison with what they're doing on Saturday nights with Collision right now. It really does. And I think this is something that Tony Khan knows he's got a gold mine with. I mean, obviously he owns the ROH library, but knowing that he can kind of expand on the mythos of Punk and Joe in 2023, knowing that Punk can't exactly work with everybody, and this is something he can really take his time with. It'll kind of refamiliarize the fans with both of these guys. Hopefully, get Punk over back in the good graces of the fans, like you talked about the Owen Hart chants throughout. And I really think this is a good thing for both parties. And if this is all we're going to see of these two in AEW as far as one-on-one is concerned, I think they did enough here to kind of, pay homage to the initial matches. But at the same time, if they're going to keep it going, I think they did a perfect job of setting up here. Bravo main event here. And, last week, with Roderick Strong and Joe going off the air, I remember you and me put over, kind of the story beat going off air with Roderick Strong and the stretcher and all that stuff. And they really are building Joe as a credible, badass mega heel on Collision. And having Punk kind of escape Joe rather than beat him, it's almost like Punk's kind of opening up Pandora's box. And I think we have yet to see all of what Joe's brutality can really be on AEW programming. So I'm excited to see where they go with this moving forward. And the sky's the limit as far as I'm concerned. Great Collision.
Man. I really hope both Punk and Joe can stay fit and avoid injuries. And, they could perfectly link this into a best of 7. They've already got, it's 3-1 now. They could continue this in a variety of ways. So we'll stay tuned and we'll absolutely be salivating over whatever combination of match they throw at us, because after this week's Collision, I don't think they can really go wrong. They're on a high at the minute, aren't they, AEW? And I really hope they can continue and sail on that high into All In and All Out later on in August.
And David, I don't mean to cut you off, but I really like what you said about Owen Hart right there, because I have to say, you have a lot of people, who are more WWE fans than they are AEW fans, kind of being like, well, what's up with this Owen Hart stuff in AEW? I mean, all these guys are Bret Hart marks. Like, why are they putting over Owen Hart? I mean, look at his career. to me, that's almost like people putting out down AEW in 2023. Because if you are a fan of professional wrestling in the United States of America, to me, you have a hard time convincing me that there's anything better in ring than what we are seeing on AEW from a wrestling perspective on a weekly basis. You take storylines completely out of it. You just go as far as, athleticism and in-ring product, a lot like the Hart brothers. It is top tier, and they are on a streak right now. And I do think the Owen Hart thing is extremely well orchestrated. Bravo, Tony Khan, AEW, and all that stuff. And, it's paying homage to a whole last generation of fans. Obviously, I didn't grow up on Owen Hart, but I still am very well versed on, his legacy in professional wrestling. And I think this stuff is just absolutely done with tact. And I hope it's something they just keep doing year after year after year after year. And bravo to Tony Khan, honestly, for kind of making it feel like a big deal, incorporating all these big story beats into the tournament as well. So, like I said, bravo to AEW on Collision. And, people are going to sit here, David, and we should go ahead and have this little conversation too about ratings.
Yeah.
People are so caught up in this, right?
Yeah.
I want to kind of get your take on that because, I think a lot of people are kind of paralleling the success and, the quality of Collision alongside with what it's drawing in TV ratings. So before I kind of go into that, as we kind of close out here, I kind of want to get your opinion on the entire ratings dialogue.
Well, I think it's drawing money and through a variety of revenue streams, and ratings really is a too simplistic way to look at things. The UK market for AEW is huge, and there's not too many AEW fans that will be watching it live as it happens because of the time difference. So we tend to wake up and we'll watch Dynamite, Rampage, and Collision in a morning, after the event. But that's kind of the way that television consumption is now, right? With streaming, people don't tend to watch too much of what they really love as it happens or as it's put out onto TV. So people's habits have changed. I think there's a lot of other metrics you could look at to judge AEW by. And there's no way television companies are going to be giving them an extra 2 hours of primetime Saturday night TV if they weren't doing something right. So yeah, the ratings conversation, although I think it can be a small marker of success, it doesn't give a big picture at all. And yeah, I really want people to start talking about the exciting stuff that we're seeing on TV and all the exciting wrestling events that we're getting at the minute and the buzz about wrestling at the minute, rather than concentrate. I mean, you could look at that crowd last night, and AEW could play to bigger crowds and sell more tickets. But the little bit that Punk said at the start about Stampede wrestling, and that being a wrestling town, Regina, right? So what they have all the right to see these AEW athletes and matches as anywhere else. So I like the fact that they take it around the States, they take it around Canada, they're bringing it to the UK. I don't think we should look at the negatives. I think we should just focus on the positives. How about you, man?
First of all, couldn't have said it any better myself. And with all of that being said, I kind of went into an entire spill about tribalism between WWE and AEW and how I'm just concerned about seeing good professional wrestling, no matter what logo is at the bottom right of that screen, whether it be AEW or WWE. And, I think going off the ratings alone is just a lazy way to go about it. Yeah. And is not the only metric. And if there's one that I want to talk about in particular, it's 2 words for you. It's not suck it. It's social media, my friend. Yes. And that's a reason that they lure in a guy like Logan Paul, because you know how many hits his stuff is going to get when he is talking about WWE in any capacity, when he's on WWE programming, how many people are going to flock to that. I mean, really look at the traction that AEW has gotten on social media. It is comparable to WWE in a lot of senses. And, people are kind of talking about this Saturday time slot, right? They're like, oh, well, once college football comes on, it's completely screwed. Blase, 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 blah. At the end of the day, man, they're not on Fox. I mean, I think comparing it to that is kind of unfair, and you're not really being realistic in and of itself either. Yeah. And I think, there was even an entire dialogue of, oh, well, TNT makes more money running Revenge of the Sith than they do with the episode of Collision already. And I just don't really think any of that is true. And like I said, I think it's a lazy narrative. I think it's a lazy metric, an overall lazy route to go if you're going to sit here and downplay just how quality Collision has been up to this point, because it's not all about the ratings, man. It's really not. And if there wasn't an audience for it, you can bet your ass that the nickname One Bill Phil would not be in the ether. Okay. But there is a reason that AEW is trending upward and they're getting more TV time allotted. And that is because they are moving upward and trending upward. And, you know, it may not be on the scale of the rivals yet. Some may even argue that you wouldn't even consider other promotions rivals, but that's not what it's about to me. To me, it's about having a cohesive product, a nice couple fun hours of wrestling, and, you know, me coming out of it feeling fulfilled. And, you know, as far as like who makes me feel something in 2023, when I'm watching All Elite Wrestling, I feel like I'm, you know, kind of at the apex of it all. And, you know, like I said, it's not a contest really, but you know, it almost seems like, you know, because CM Punk is kind of at the spearhead of this whole thing, there is a large subsection of people actively rooting for this entire Collision thing to fall on its head. And so far, they're choking on their words, because this is great television we're getting so far. And I don't know who's creatively responsible for it, but bravo to them as well. There's rumors that it's Punk. There's rumors that it's Dax. You know, who knows who's running the ship over there, but it feels like those are two different groups on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And I just want to give my hands off to the Saturday group, because I love coming on these review shows and talking about this, because this is what AEW should be all about.
Yeah. And I'll just close a couple of bits. So your SmackDown debate with Vandy, I love it. And I love that kind of friendly competition, that banter that we call it in the UK, right? The banter. It doesn't have to get nasty. We're AEW guys, I think. They're WWE guys, but we all love wrestling. I think that's where we can kind of draw the line. I didn't like SmackDown. Well, I liked SmackDown. I liked the Bloodline bit, but the fact that it overran so much, it crapped on guys like Karrion Kross and Asuka, which was my problem. You know, that the performers didn't get as much time as they should have, that their matches got short. And, you know, to rebuild Karrion Kross now, it's you know, they just make it difficult, don't they, when AJ Styles beats him so quick. But in terms of wrestling and Collision and CM Punk, I went through a time, you know, in the past 6 months where I was a little bit angry with Punk. I'm a huge Punk fan, but it really hurt AEW. But what Punk has shown me since he come back, that he loves pro wrestling. Tell me when I'm telling lies, you know, to quote himself. He loves pro wrestling, and there was a bit of damage done, but episodes like this, stories like this with Samoa Joe and what it leads on to, you know, for me, that goes a long way. So I'm glad Punk's back in the fold. I'm glad Collision's on such a good run. And I'm happy that we can have the conversation about SmackDown and Collision and what we liked and what we didn't like and the different type of show. But let's just enjoy wrestling, man.
Amen. I'm all for it. And, you know, I a lot like you, I enjoy the banter as well. And, you know, that was kind of the mission statement of HCTV here. You know, me and Andy would kind of be like, who won this week? And, you know, I guess I kind of took more of a step back and just try to enjoy both products for what they are. And I do give objective analysis on both products. While I am an AEW guy, I watch WWE every week. I don't miss the programming. I don't miss the PLEs. When I like something, I talk about how much I like it. When I hate it, I'll tell you why I hate it. But I'm going to be honest and I'm going to be fair about both products. But I do feel like sometimes when you're leaning more on the WWE side, it's almost like there's a little bit of, you talked about it at the beginning of this episode, a little bit of a satisfaction with any type of trend of AEW stock going down or looking like things aren't going well. So that competition's there. And
I kind of see that WWE is the big bro.
Like-minded is that we're not really rooting for anybody to fail.
No. I see WWE is like the big brother, you know, always kind of like getting a few digs. If WWE fans feeling like those big brother to AEW fans and just giving them the odd little knock.
Well, David, I also feel like, and I'm not trying to open Pandora's box on this, right? But I almost feel like WWE created AEW, right? Like, we wanted the alternative. We wanted somewhere for these other guys to work. We wanted a company that gave us good quality wrestling and, you know, a cohesive narrative and, you know, not big, sweaty, you know, power lifters in the ring. You know, I don't want to watch Vince play with his toys. I want to watch wrestling, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, I feel like that's what AEW offers. And, you know, I just, it kind of cracks me up that, you know, it's almost like, instead of, you know, being like all these guys that are in the business backstage, just being happy that everybody's getting a job and everybody is working, and there's so many different places to work in 2023.
Yes.
Everybody is just so conditioned. Stateside, UK doesn't matter, that WWE is the be all and end all. And I can assure anyone watching or listening to this that it is not. There is so much great professional wrestling in 2023. If SmackDown sucks, go watch AEW. If Raw sucks, go watch TNA. I can sit here and list promotion after promotion. I mean, NJPW, you got NJPW World. Like, we don't review everything here on HGTV, but me and David are both big advocates for there is wrestling outside of WWE. And I think that's really the overall point that I'm trying to convey when I am, trying to be balanced about the whole WWE AEW debate. I think it's healthy. I think it's always going to be there, and it's only going to get worse, David. But I certainly enjoy talking about Saturday night so far. That's for sure.
Me too, man. Well, we'll leave it there. Thanks everybody for listening and for watching. It's been Dave Robinson and Parker Hamlet. Buckle down. Stay safe, everyone.